21 minutes after 6, you're watching Sunrise live on air. Now, all lawyers and advocates are said to have their fees capped and will be required to do a prescribed amount of compulsory community service. And this is a pro bono. A bill concerning this issue, initiated by the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development, has been approved by Cabinet. Now, the legal practice bill seeks to introduce reforms aimed at increasing access to legal services and to justice. And to talk more about the objectives of this bill, we have the Deputy Minister of Justice, Deputy Minister Andre Snell. We also have Mr. Sam Mkabela. He's to my immediate left, and he is HR General Manager for the Scorpions Legal Services. And in our Cape Town studios, we have Advocate Rudy van Rooyen, a Senior Counsel at the Cape Bar Council. And you at home, as always, we invite your opinion on 011-537-9333 or 9345. You can send your messages on Facebook and Twitter. Good morning to both of you, and to Advocate van Rooyen in our Cape Town studios. I think Deputy Minister
and your listeners.
Thank you. Now let's look at the context, or maybe the predecessor to the legal practice bill. What brought about this process?
Well, if I can maybe just highlight what the three main objectives of the legal practice bill are. It's firstly, in order to provide an overarching regulatory framework for the entire legal profession, both advocates as well as attorneys. The problem at the moment is that all attorneys are obliged to belong to the Law Society. It's a statutory body. Advocates, on the other hand, belong to a voluntary organization, a bar council. However, it's not compulsory. So you have a significant and growing number of independent advocates who don't belong to any regulatory body. So we believe that South Africans are entitled, when they procure legal services, to do so on the basis that there are uniform standards, and also that if they have any complaints, there are mechanisms where they can complain. So the legal practice bill also makes provision for a legal services ombud. The second main objective is access to justice, and that's where the question of regulating fees comes in, as well as compulsory community service. And then lastly, the aim of the bill is also to speed up the transformation of the profession itself, which is not reflective of South African society in terms of race and gender.
Yeah, but what legislation is in existence? Because if you look at transformation, this is not an issue that just cropped up. It's a perennial issue, and when it comes to equal justice and access to legal services, is something that had been problematic previously. So what is currently in existence while we wait for this bill to be promulgated?
Well, as I said, I mean, you've got the Attorneys Act, which creates the law societies. Interestingly, there as well, we have a serious problem. I don't know whether you and the public know that we still have a law society of Bophuthatswana, and Siskai and Venda probably as well. So one of the objects of the legal practice bill is in fact to bring regularity to that situation.
All right, standardization, streamlining access to justice, especially to indigent or poor communities, is important, but this will impact on your business, Babu Mkabela, and how will that be?
We believe it will have a positive impact on our business because it will make the process easier to follow. In that sense, it will provide access, and we believe it will make the process speeded up. And by speeding it up, it's in the interest of our members, many of whom get discouraged along the process. And we also believe that by shortening the process and making it less complex, it will also make it more affordable.
All right, Advocate van Rooyen in our Cape Town studios. Now, you're from the Cape Bar Council, and you're the Senior Counsel there. How will this proposed legal practice bill impact on you, considering what Deputy Minister was saying, that there needs to be a standardization, be it of fees or even the regulatory bodies that either attorneys or lawyers fall under?
Just as a departing point, I think it is important to know that there are many aspects that we agree on in principle. It is important to know that, like the Department of Justice, we believe that the independence of the profession is all important. Secondly, it's important to make a distinction between attorneys and advocates, and in principle the bill does that. We are in full agreement that access to justice is important. We are in full agreement that transformation is imperative. And I agree with the Deputy Minister that in principle, a legal practice council will be able to perform a valuable service. And I agree that the Ombud is important in order to give the public or anyone else access to a body where they can complain if they have difficulties with the profession. But how those principles are packaged in the bill must be considered thoroughly. And we are quite concerned that in pursuing access to justice, one should not simply abolish the present governing structures of advocates, for example, because we are geared to serve the public. We are geared to make sure that we provide services where people cannot afford it. And it is worrying that sweeping statements are made about fees, for example, without considering what we as a profession are doing in order to provide pro bono services and in order to make justice accessible.
All right, Advocate Van Rooyen, we'll continue our discussion. We quickly have to take news headlines. And it all sounded like we're in consensus, 100% agreement, until we got that pregnant but the principles and how this will impact on the legal fraternity. But we continue our discussions with Mr. Andries Senel. He's the Deputy Minister at the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development. Advocate Rudy Van Rooyen is a Senior Counsel at the Cape Bar Council. And Dr. Sam Mkabela, he is the Director at Scorpion Legal Protection. We'll take a quick ad break. Mark Chase is already standing by with the news headlines. Sunrise.
So thanks to Lee for that update. Now we continue our discussion on the legal practice bill, which seeks to cap legal fees. And we asked you what you thought about it. We're checking out our Facebook pages, starting out with Vincent. He says maybe lawyers will stop eating people's money. Johannes then says, well, we had a case against our previous company, but due to legal fees, we were unable to proceed, and this discouraged us. Manamolela says it will definitely go a long way in halting the ill treatment of poor South Africans by lawyers. It's long overdue. They really must be regulated. And then finally, Mabakana says the practice bill wants to do away with the Law Society and the bar. I think that's a bad idea, and also doing away with the conveyances, board exams will be disastrous. So those are the thoughts coming through from our viewers. Cindy, it's back to you in the studio.
Thanks so much. And I can see Deputy Minister already shaking his head saying, no, those are totally misrepresented issues.
Well, the last one, the first ones, I think some of them I might agree with.
Yeah.
But I think to say that what the bill envisages is an overarching South African Legal Practice Council. It doesn't abolish the distinction between attorneys and advocates. It only says that all of them must fall under this overarching council. Secondly, it does make provision for the council to set standards, to set educational requirements, to set requirements with respect to professional training. So the abolition of requirements for conveyances is not there. I think to come to the issue of fees, what is important to recognize is that we have a structure of the legal profession which makes for very, very high fees. At the moment, you are required to go to an attorney. It's the attorney who then briefs an advocate. So you are paying first for the attorney, then you pay for the advocate. Also, you don't deal directly with the advocate. So it's the attorney who negotiates the fees with the advocate, leaving the poor client outside. There's no regulation at the moment, especially for advocates, in terms of the fee structure. What this bill intends to do is create a framework within which the profession itself can also be involved in setting a framework for the determination of reasonable fees. We don't want to deny those legal practitioners the right to an existence, but we believe that that must be reasonable and those fees must be accessible to the majority of South Africans.
Okay, Advocate Van Rooyen, a hypothesis to you. I recently bought a piece of property, and the whole hierarchy and value chain when it comes to the legal services that you pay for, hugely complicated, hugely convoluted, hugely expensive. So how do you think this bill will address that, and particularly to the benefit of the consumer? Advocate Van Rooyen, can you hear me? All right, Dr. Sam, maybe you can take that question. How does this benefit the consumer in accessing legal services?
Well, in our opinion, if the process is long, the legal process is long, it tends to accumulate costs to a point which make those costs unaffordable for the consumer. That's the one aspect. The other aspect is that the consumer expects some consistency of pricing or whatever we choose to call it. To the extent that government is saying, let us engage on a framework to create parameters, to create clarity, to set standards, where to some extent the cost could be predictable for the consumer. We think that is a positive for the consumer. We don't read this bill to mean that the right to self-regulation of the profession is being taken away, but we understand it to be seeking a social partnership, which can have a positive social impact.
Yeah, but we know that even in the medical fraternity or more pharmaceuticals, with the whole distribution or point of sale a fee, there had been some contestation. And particularly here, I'll try Advocate Van Rooyen again and see how the fee structures, what are you hoping to gain out of it, especially if we want to benefit the consumer more? Advocate Van Rooyen, can you hear me?
Thank you, yes. Well, let us start with the issue of fees and regulation of fees. It is not as if we as a profession have not been wanting to do that. In fact, we had guidelines until 2008, 2009, when the Competition Commission told us, no, you're not allowed to do that. I was in a meeting together with others with the Minister in August 2009, where we raised this and we informed him that we had those guidelines exactly for the protection of the public, and if people had complaints, they could come to us. And may I add, at the time I was the chairman of the Cape Bar Council, and there was not one single complaint about those parameters that we proposed, but we had to suspend them as a result of the Competition Commission. So I think it's not quite fair that the impression is created that we have not been regulating ourselves. So in principle, yes, we're in favor of it, but leave it to the profession.
All right, let's take a caller. Saul in Cape Town. Sorry to break your word, but let's take a caller. Saul in Cape Town. Hello to you. Hi, Saul. All right, we'll have to get back to, I think one of the viewers also spoke about the imbalance of power, especially if you're going to take on a multinational, huge corporate, and they drag out, you know, then they can do that. It's their prerogative to drag out the case, and you then left bankrupt as the complainant. How's this bill going to help?
Well, I think just to touch upon a number of other issues as well. I think the point of a social partnership is very, very important. This bill seeks to create a council in which the profession, the advocates and the attorneys are represented. It also makes provision for the minister to appoint 3 representatives from outside the profession, as well as someone from Legal Aid South Africa, as well as from the legal academics. The criticism has been raised that government is intending to control the profession. I think we might need to state it very, very clearly. This will be a council of 21 members. Only 3 of those will be appointed by the minister. So really, there's no basis whatsoever to think that those 3 are going to manipulate 16 well-trained advocates and attorneys. We do respect the independence of the legal profession, but the Constitution itself also, in Section 22, says that professions, trades, can and in some cases must be regulated.
Okay, I believe Saul is back with us on the line. Hello to you, Saul. Hi, Saul.
Good morning.
Yes.
Saul speaking. Well with you from the panel. So I'd just like to know, where does the paralegal industry fit into this legal practice law? Because they did mention this a couple of years ago already, that paralegals would possibly get more recognition, etc. I would like more clarity on where the paralegals fit in.
A paralegal, he says. My line is a bit distorted.
It's an incredibly important question that he's raising. As the department, we believe that paralegals have a very, very important role to play in promoting access to justice, and that is why we, through the Foundation for Human Rights, have a program to encourage the establishment of advice officers and the training of paralegals. This bill doesn't deal directly with the question of paralegals, but it does it opens the space for a framework for paralegals to be set.
All right, Advocate Van Rooyen, before we let you go, what suggestions will you be tabling once the council is formed and you deliberate on, one, the community service that young lawyers or young graduates are proposed to be having, and also the fee structure? So what are your suggestions so far?
As far as the community service is concerned, in principle, once again, we have no difficulty with that. We have had intensive pro bono programs going for years. Unfortunately, the public is not always told of that. They just hear about the fees we charge. So no, we have no difficulty with that in principle, as long as that is regulated and governed by the profession itself. As far as the fees are concerned, once again, we have no difficulty in principle that it be looked at intensively, and that it be looked at insofar as one has access to justice and how one can improve that. But once again, that must be left to the profession. I tried to illustrate to you earlier on that we had been doing that until we were told by the Competition Commission not to proceed with it.
All right, Advocate Van Rooyen, we're going to let you go, but thanks so much indeed for your time. Just a last word from Ubaba Mkhabela. When it comes to access to justice, regardless of your social standing, I made the example earlier on of trying to take on a multinational big corporation as a Jane Doe. How is this going to assist, you think?
We believe that it will enable consumers to get access to lower charges, lower premiums for insurance, or fees payable to lawyers. We think the process will be less intimidating, it will be simpler, it will be faster, and it will be shorter. And we believe it will enable a high degree of self-service, where a member of the public can approach an advocate directly or an attorney as is appropriate. At this point in time, that degree of self-service is non-existent. And from that standpoint, to the extent that all these things will be driven through a social partnership, we think it's a very positive development.
All right, Babu Mkhabela. And Deputy Minister, just lastly as well, public submissions are still open until the 27th of July. What is the next process or the next phase after that?
The bill is currently before Parliament. Parliament is processing it, and we would encourage everyone, both the legal profession, but also most importantly, every single South African who's affected by our justice system, to make submissions to the parliamentary process.
But accessing, I mean, we were just speaking to Advocate Van Rooyen saying that they already have what one could dub a CSI kind of project, pro bono work that they're doing with those that can't access fees. So when you look at the quality of the service that you'll be acquiring, Babu Mkhabela, won't you just maybe send your most junior of lawyers sort of as a practice exercise in those kind of cases?
No, far from it. We currently send the most competent lawyers to serve our clients, and we're trying to make the connection between access and competence to be a very inexpensive connection. That is what we're saying, and we're also saying it should not be a connection which only exists in an intimidating environment. We'd like that connection to be there, where just as much as a person can walk into a clinic and say, I need to be stitched up, they should be able to walk to an advocate and say, I need this service.
Yeah. Joe in Pretoria, thanks for your patience, and what's your view?
Thanks so much, Lily. Good morning, and you and the as well as the
Joe? Yeah, move around a little bit. Joe, you're fading.
Yes.
Move around a little bit.
Can you hear me now, Cindy?
Much better.
Yeah. The question, first of all, I actually wanted to congratulate, the Department of Justice, with this bill, because clearly, if you get down to the ground, Cindy, you'll realize how injustice is being committed to people by being prohibited by the high fees that are charged by the legal fraternity. So it is an excellent start. It's very important. But the second thing that I wanted to refer the Minister to an actual case where I'm involved. I'm involved in very high-profile cases where I had to defend myself because I didn't have money to engage a lawyer and an advocate. At first, I engaged a lawyer and then an advocate, but because the matter ran so long, I ran out of funds. I then decided to defend myself on a number of matters. In this particular matter that I want to refer to, the applicant, because I was the respondent, the applicant decided to withdraw the matter, because they couldn't sustain their argument. And then they offered wasted costs. But because I was representing myself, I cannot actually claim any fees for all my wasted time. I mean, I had to prepare for the case, and I had to be in court for those number of days. And I cannot claim those wasted costs because I'm said not to be registered as a lawyer, number one. And then the other point, really quickly, is that I think what the Justice Department should actually do is actually to come with, but I think the caller from Cape Town actually made a good point. If we can actually come with paralegals where a man from the street can actually go to these paralegals, because you see the challenge in my case was the fact that in order to prepare for a case, Cindy, there are things that you've got to do and in a given manner.
Yes, Joe. I'm really sorry, but we're out of time, Joe. Please, won't you just leave us your details and we'll forward that to Deputy Minister, and we promise that he'll get back to you, because it is a cumbersome process and in most cases very oppressive if you don't have the resources or the funds as well. I just want to touch on very quickly as well, where you find cases, be it largely on illegal evictions or untoward behavior when it comes from lawyers. Or does the bill cover the victims, as it were, in that case?
Maybe just before coming to that, to say that the department is taking a number of other initiatives to facilitate access to justice. I think one of the big success stories in our justice system is Legal Aid South Africa, which provides representation to probably over 250,000 people a year in criminal matters, and is starting increasingly also to render assistance in civil matters. Secondly, the department, together with the judiciary, is busy with a project to review our civil justice system, to make it more simpler, faster, more cost-effective, also to enhance access to justice.
Yeah, and I was just saying about illegal evictions, for instance, or if your home or assets are repossessed, will the bill cover that, or is that specific to more consumer?
I think that's more of a consumer-related issue, but just important to say that in land-related matters, Legal Aid South Africa does provide some degree of assistance.
Yeah, and quickly advice to consumers or just South Africans in general in protecting yourself, that in the event where you need litigation, you need to have some form of background information. You need to be able to have events leading up to where you are.
Well, the advice is that the consumers need to familiarize themselves not just with the law, but with where they can get help. And in our opinion, from scope on legal protection, it's always advisable to have some legal expenses insurance, because you never know when you're going to need it. And again, legal expenses insurance just doesn't mean that we're going to give you the cheapest option on the block. It means we're going to give you the most affordable option, where the consumer gets a decent price and the lawyer gets paid a decent fee.
All right, thanks indeed for your time, much appreciated.
Thank you very much.
We're speaking to Deputy Minister of Justice and Constitutional Development, Deputy Minister Andre Snell. We had Advocate Rudy van Rooyen, Senior Counsel at the Cape Bar Council, on the line from our Cape Town studios, and Babu Sam Mkabela, his Director at Scorpion Legal Protection, talking about the Cabinet approval or the legal practice bill that is currently in front of Cabinet, and public submissions. It has to be written, though, and you can send those through before the 27th of July. Sunrise.